Three, two, one. We're live. We had some technical difficulties. We won't be going live tonight, but we will provide you with an NHL season preview. I'm Andy MacNeil with VSiN. With me is Dom Luszczyszyn. Is that pretty good?
That was pretty good.
Yeah, I practiced for like 2 days, so I expect it to be pretty good. Jeff Davis from Circa. Dom from The Athletic. He's a great writer, provides projections, analytics, just a bunch of great stuff over there. Jeff Davis from Circa, we don't have him here because he's a bookie. We have him here because he's a very sharp hockey mind, and so is Rob Pizzola, a sports bettor from Toronto, who has focused on the NHL for a lot of years. He's probably been in it longer than he even likes to think he is. So excited to get going and talk about the NHL season tonight. These are the people that I would bring together if I had a question about anything hockey related, especially from a betting perspective. But yeah, the season gets going tomorrow on Wednesday, and I'm really excited to talk about it. First things first, I really want to get right into betting advice, and I just was wondering if any of you guys, and I'll start with Dom, specifically from a forecasting standpoint, if there's any tips or advice that you have for anybody that's looking to get into betting on the NHL regularly.
Do you mean like game betting or preseason betting?
Yeah, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Whatever it is, it really doesn't matter.
It's
Preseason.
Preseason, honestly,
Sure.
whatever the advice is just read what I write and just follow that. I think that's really, other than make your own model and back test it and do all of that, I don't know if you'll get anything as good from the public sphere, because the guys with me are not putting their numbers out for free like I am.
For sure, yeah, no, that's a great point, and I agree with that wholeheartedly. I think your work is some of the best, and one of the things that I really enjoy about what you do is you look back on everything that you've predicted over the course of the season, whether that's player points or season point totals for teams, and I really enjoy that. Rob, do you have any betting advice for anybody, whether it's preseason, on a game-by-game basis, anything that you think is worth sharing to get people ready for this upcoming NHL season?
Yeah, I mean, this doesn't strictly apply to the NHL, but it applies to betting in all aspects. And I can't believe I'm saying this after what's happened on Twitter today with the arguments about closing line value and things of that nature. But I'm a big believer in closing line value in general as being a great predictor of success. A lot of people will jump into a sport, they'll bet it, they'll find some early success or maybe early failure, and that either forces them, they end up going bigger than they should, or forces them away from a sport rather than tracking metrics that are indicators of future success. So for me, it would be more so bet early if you're not an expert, because you're going to have the best advantage if you're betting early on, as the lines become more efficient with limits going up higher, and track whether or not lines are moving in your favor or not. And if they are, you're probably doing something right. And if they're not, you got to go back to the drawing board and figure out what you're doing wrong. So hockey, just like any major North American sport, is very difficult to beat. And it's especially difficult when you don't know if you have an edge or not. And the market will be a pretty quick indicator of whether or not you do.
Yeah, no, I agree with those points for sure. I think I do wonder about this season as far as the advantage in betting early. I wonder how much of that is going to be eroded because of the uncertainty that we have with everything pandemic related. But I do agree with you. That was something I was thinking about heading into this tonight. Is that something I want to advise recreational bettors, smaller bettors to do this year, is to bet early, or is that kind of a little bit more trouble this time around? But definitely think that's good advice. Jeff, from your standpoint as a bookmaker, is there anything that you see that, like, specifically recreational casual bettors do in the hockey market that is probably not something that's a good idea, something they might want to stop? Is there a better way to approach it? Anything that you'd like to share?
Kind of piggybacking on what you guys just said about closing line value and tracking, most of the recreational players aren't tracking pretty much anything. They're just gambling. And ultimately, if you want to win, you have to get the best of the number over the long term. The variance in this sport is crazy. So the only real way, the worst bettors can win in a hockey season and the best bettors can lose in a hockey season. The sample size really isn't that big. So, tracking it for a few years and then seeing how you do and seeing where you are in regards to the market and what bets you're making, you'll have success in the long run if you're beating the market.
For sure, yeah, and I mean these are all things that I would definitely say myself if I was asked to share some advice, and just kind of like you said, piggybacking on some of those things, even just not so much closing line value and beating the line by a lot. I would just recommend that you try to get the best of it as much as you can. Just don't get the worst of the number. You might not get the best of it. You might not get that team that was plus 160 last night and is down to plus 135 by the morning skate. But don't back them when they're plus 20, right? It's that little bit of extra self-discipline to practice and make part of your daily regiment can go a long way. I guess we can get right into the season. I think if we just get into the divisions, things will kind of flow. We can get through this, and maybe actually give some people some actionable info here. And I was thinking we'd start with the West Division because I find it pretty intriguing. Dom, I actually didn't get a chance to read your previews for the West Division. I know they were coming out kind of later in the month here, or as we progressed towards the season, there were some of the later previews that you were releasing. I think it's kind of a three-way dance. I don't think that's a surprise to anybody, but the Golden Knights, the Avalanche, and the St. Louis Blues for the top spot. The Arizona Coyotes and the Wild in the middle, and then the three California teams kind of bunched together at the bottom. But for me, I think it's the Avs are the clear favorite here. I think they've got the edge on the Golden Knights specifically because of the depth at the center position. It's not that they're they're deep per se, I guess, but William Karlsson is a player that, like, on his best day is probably half the player that Nathan MacKinnon is. And after that, I don't think they have anybody that matches up to Nazem Kadri. I think, and that the Golden Knights, I'm sorry. I don't think that they have another centerman that matches up as good as any of the centermen that the Avalanche have. I think they're kind of betting on magic beans if they're hoping that Cody Glass morphs into that guy right away, or Chandler Stevenson, who was on the first line, I believe, at practice today with Mark Stone and Pat Chiaretti. But I just like the Avalanche team overall. I don't think they have as good of a starting goaltender, but I like their tandem overall more. I don't think they have the big guns on defense. Well, they have Makar, of course, but I like their defense overall more than I like the Golden Knights defense. So that's why I give them the edge. I don't think it's a big gap. And then I think there's a bigger gap between the Knights and the Blues. But I would just like to hear your guys' thoughts, and I guess I'll start with Dom.
That's one of the toughest divisions for those top teams. It's sort of like the Atlantic has been over the past few years with Toronto, Boston, and Tampa Bay, where you always saw Toronto struggle because they were that clear number 3 team. And it's sort of the same this year, where St. Louis is in that hole, and they really need to, all three of those teams need to do whatever they can to win the top seed, because it's going to be a huge advantage come playoff time to face one of Minnesota or Arizona if things fall that way, rather than face one of each other. And I do like Colorado the most. I think anyone worth paying attention to is going to say the same thing. As much as they don't have 2 elite stars like Vegas does, they have such strong depth with Devin Taves and Samuel Girard, and even Ryan Graves was pretty solid last year. So it's hard not to back the Avs, but Vegas, they made some interesting choices in the offseason. I don't know if I love getting rid of Stastny and having that center depth, but I think it's going to be it's going to be worth it for having Pietrangelo and Theodore manning their own pairs. And if Stevenson looks the way he did last year between Stone and Pacioretty, I think they could be fine.
Rob, do you have any thoughts on the West Division? Any bets? Anything out of that division?
Yeah, I mean, I think I echo pretty much what you guys are saying at the top of the division. I think the gap between Colorado and Vegas is pretty much the exact same gap between Vegas and St. Louis, personally. I think it's like a clear 1, a clear 2, and a clear 3 in the division for me overall. Colorado's a machine. I mean, I can't remember the last time I shouldn't say that. I think actually Tampa Bay last year was probably just as deep as Colorado is going into this season as well. And I do like the fact that they have 2 goaltenders that are fine. Like in a season where you're going to see a lot of teams have like one goaltender play 60 to 70% of the starts and the other 30 to 40. Francouz, like some people rag on him for a playoff performance last year, but for a backup goalie, he's pretty much as good as it gets in the league. Well, not necessarily, but he's right up there. So I think Colorado's pretty deep. I think they'll win the division. I do think they're going to be overpriced a lot this year in general, just judging by the first day of the season with Colorado and St. Louis. We're starting to see where the Avalanche are going to be priced, and I foresee myself betting against them a lot and not really loving that. It's like one of those hold your nose specials because they could be that good, but that's the gap there. For me, I'm kind of like interested in the middle tier there, and this is going to apply across all the divisions, but if you're betting some futures or anything, like I'll just give an example, but I took John Gibson to win the Vezina at prices of like around 50 to 1. And to me, it's one of those where Anaheim's not expected to do anything, but if they squeak into the playoffs in that division, like he's very much in the conversation. And I think you're going to see that in a lot of the divisions that are top heavy, where there's like 2 or 3 teams that are almost shoo-ins for the playoff spots. That 4th team potentially getting in to a playoff spot, it's worth taking some long shot value or on like some props that are out there as an example, because I honestly, like, I don't really see that much of a gap. I don't like Minnesota. I don't like Arizona. I don't think there's really that much of a drop off to Anaheim personally. But the bottom feeders there are bad. The Kings and the Sharks are pretty bad.
Jeff, any final thoughts about your Vegas Golden Knights? Obviously, you're a bit of a homer, but we'll let you chime in.
Well, there's not much I can add to what you guys have said about the top of the division. The one thing I do like with Vegas's defense is they're going to have Pietrangelo or Theodore on the ice for 45, 46 minutes a game, and those guys move the puck as good as any. So while they have a glaring lack of depth at center, this team can really skate. They play both ways. Yes, I think Colorado is better than Vegas, but I mean Vegas has as good of a chance as any. This team is very good, and honestly, I just want to watch this Vegas Colorado playoff series, which seemingly inevitable. But yeah, Rob, you were saying about the bottom of the division. To me, San Jose is just going to be awful. A bet I have, San Jose under 57.5. Somehow their goaltending position got worse than it was last year. Basically, every goaltender that was available to get was better than what they had, and they went out and got Devin Dubnyk, who, seems to be pretty washed. The bottom 6 on this team is very, very bad. Burns only plays on half the ice. We don't know what we're going to get out of Karlsson. There's been, such a decline in his play since his time in Ottawa. Yeah, he might be healthier this year, but again, he might be. Vlasic looks done. This team has disaster potential written all over it.
Yeah, it's really weird. The goalie ad was one thing. It's just a weird situation because they sold their future for Karlsson, and it just doesn't look like they were in the position to do that. I guess they were hoping to cash in early in that after acquiring him, but that didn't happen, and it looks like I don't know, at least in the near future, it doesn't look like there's a lot of optimism around the San Jose Sharks. I do think Cal Peterson is kind of a wild card. I think he's got some potential. So he was pretty strong down the stretch. So he could make some noise with the Kings. But the Kings aren't a team that I expect to do a whole lot this season, obviously. But yeah, I actually took a flyer on Dallas Eakins at 50-1 to win the Jack Adams because I think he's got the story. Narratives aren't a part of my day-to-day betting, but in terms of award wins, they are a big part of that. And after what happened to him in Edmonton, things went pretty badly there when he got his first shot as an NHL coach. I think it would be a pretty big story in the league if he was to take a Ducks team, to the playoffs and to win the Jack Adams Trophy. I think you need good goaltending, so he has that. A good pick if you can get 50-1, in my opinion. But yeah, I don't know. I don't have a whole lot to say about this division. I did recommend Vegas under 75.5, which is something you can find out on the East Coast in the United States there. But I don't think you'll find anything like that in Vegas. Is that correct, Jeff?
Yeah, I think we're like the market is kind of in the 72.5, 73.5 range right now, which I believe I made it 74.5. So yeah, it's all in that ballpark right now.
Yeah, I'm at 71.5, and I think it's kind of funny how the narrative that the Vegas books are always inflated on the Golden Knights actually have a lower season point total than the ones out in the Jersey area.
Yeah, that kind of was to me that was like a first year thing, and that's kind of settled in now. You will find one or two local shops, especially at post, when it's the last game on the board and it's the quote unquote get out game for the public, and you just see these numbers that you just want to bet the dog almost every time when they're at home. And like Rob said, it's a hold your nose, but the value seems to always be there, like 2-3 minutes to puck drop.
Well, that's one thing I was going to mention in regards to Vegas this year, because it seems like the market prices their home ice higher than any other team in the league. And we've seen that ever since they've come into the league. Whether that's just people dumping on Vegas because it's the home team, or whether there's something there, I'm not quite sure. But the lack of home ice this year and the lack of fans, I wonder if that impacts Vegas more than any other team in the league. At least I think historically the market would say that it does. And I think that's kind of maybe a hidden factor that's going unnoticed going into this season.
That's a great point. I think that's something definitely to monitor throughout this season. Moving on, I guess we will talk about the Central. Seems like some logical progression there. I think everybody would agree that it's pretty clear who the top two teams are: Tampa Bay and then Carolina. I guess there are some in the hockey analytics community that believe Carolina have taken that step and are a better team than Tampa Bay, but I don't believe that's the case just yet. Dom, how do you feel about this division? I think it's like a 6-sided die. We can forget about Detroit and Chicago making the playoffs for the most part. I mean, there's a chance, but it's not very good. How do you feel about the Central Division, and do you like anything from a betting perspective? I know we collaborated on a Carolina to make the playoffs at -200 and Tampa Bay to make the playoffs at -300 or -330 maybe, but I don't think you'll find those anymore.
Yeah, it's not even just those two. I feel like every single opening playoff line was extremely soft. It used to be the point totals market that was very easy to expose, and lately, over the last 2 years, you'll get Tampa Bay, the best team in the league, opening at like -300 to make the playoffs. And it's like, this team makes the playoffs over 90% of the time. Why is it so soft? And those lines are probably obviously gone by now, but it's not a betting opportunity when they first come up. And I don't know. I obviously don't believe in Dylan Strome as the #1 center for Chicago. So those last two teams are a write-off. But the other 6, I think, that middle 4 is going to be a real dogfight, because Florida has some good pieces. They made some interesting moves during the offseason. Columbus is one of the best defensive teams in the league. Nashville is the ultimate average wild card that can go either way depending on how their best players play. And Dallas, I don't love them, but they're a good defensive team. And once Bishop and Sagan come back, they will still be one of the stronger teams because of that.
Rob?
I don't like many of the teams in this division overall. I could have totally seen myself fading a lot of these teams had the divisions been set up a little bit differently. I'm very interested in Tampa Bay, just in general, because I do think Carolina has a shot to win the division. I'm generally high on Carolina, but the one thing about the Lightning is that we have this sample of players that have played alongside Kucherov for a long time. And it's very hard, in my opinion, to quantify what his absence is going to mean for that entire team and for the rest of those players. So I could potentially see them being overvalued going into the year. I think they're way more likely overvalued than undervalued. But there's not really major threats in the division outside of Carolina. Like it would take some real magic, I think, for one of these other teams to come up and win it all, or a lot of things going, all together. Personally, I think Dallas is a big fade. I thought they were a fade before the COVID issues, and now the schedule is going to get even more condensed for them. They're going to have some even tougher situations to play in going forwards. I think Rick Bowness at 33-1 is a decent bet to be the first coach fired, because it's not really that difficult, the division. I can see them getting out to a tough start without Bishop and Sagan there as well. So personally, for me, I think my biggest takeaway from the division would be I think the Stars are a fade this year. I'm not as high on them as anyone, and I'd probably be higher on Carolina than I think maybe the market or in general people are. But there's really that middle tier of teams. There's no order that would really surprise me, because I do think that there's just not much of a gap between those four.
Jeff, before I get to you, I just want to touch on something that Rob said, because I remember right before the Dallas and Calgary series kicked off last year, Rob mentioned to me that he said I don't even want to give the Dallas Stars any home ice advantage in this series because Rick Bowness is such an idiot or something along those lines, right? He's probably a negative. And then what happens? They go to the Stanley Cup final. So, but yeah, I could definitely see that. Jeff, do you have any thoughts on the Central? I mean, I know that you like the Hurricanes as well, just like the rest of us. They're a fancy stats darling. They always have been. What are your thoughts on this division? Do you have any kind of maybe surprising thoughts on the Dallas, the Nashville, Columbus, Florida? I don't expect to hear anything shocking from you regarding Chicago and Detroit, but what are your thoughts?
Yeah, this is an interesting division because it's almost in three parts. So like Tampa and Carolina are almost shoo-ins to make the playoffs. Chicago and Detroit have almost no chance to make the playoffs, and then you just have the other four teams. And they're also amazingly flawed and have some pieces that maybe work out. Like Florida, like Dom said, is interesting because they have some offensive talent there, and they have a guy, Bobrovsky, who has been the best goalie on the planet a few different times, and he looked absolutely horrendous last year. And how much of that was seeing a lot more difficult shot quality, as with the bad Florida defenders in front of him, versus when he played in Columbus? And did he sign a big contract and wave the white flag, or was it a blip? Who knows? Goaltending is very, I don't want to say random, but it's highly variant, and it would not shock me in the least to see Bobrovsky with a huge bounce back this year. I'm not betting on that. The numbers, the point totals on Florida, low 60s, seems about right. As far as Rob said with Dallas, I totally agree. Not sure where the goals are going to come from. Hudobin had off-season surgery. He had COVID. We don't know what he's going to be. So, yeah, this very interesting to see what happens in this division and who makes the playoffs. But whoever it might be, it's really hard to see past Tampa and Carolina playing in the last playoff series in this division.
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of value if you're getting plus 350 on the Hurricanes to win the division. Maybe I think they're going to win about 29% of the time, so plus 245 ish is a fair price. One prop that I played, player future, was Saros, the goalie for the Nashville Predators, to win the Vezina at 50 to 1. He was like the longest shot on the board. I thought to myself, there wasn't a whole lot of reasoning behind it. I mean, other than the fact that the guy has posted a 920 save percentage several times in his career over a large enough sample where I think, like, okay, he can do it this season. Over a large enough sample, and he's still pretty young at, I think, 25. He's going to be handed the keys this year in all likelihood, and if you're looking for a bet for the Predators, I think that's your play rather than backing them at 8 to 1 to win a division that they're probably not going to win. He could at least be considered for the award at the end of the season, depending on what happens.
I think that's a good bet, personally. I think Saros is a great goaltender just in general, and just the way that this division shapes up. I mean, it's not unheard of that Nashville could end up in the 2 spot. I mean, potentially the 1.
Sure.
It would be like really take a lot to end up in the 1. For me, this division, we talked about Detroit really doesn't have a chance to make the playoffs, but their point total is 42.5. They're going to be competitive in a lot of these games because outside of Tampa and Carolina, which they badly outmatched Detroit, the rest of the division is pretty soft. There's lacking goals from a lot of these teams, Columbus and Dallas especially. Like, to me, that's a low number. Even though they're a really bad hockey team, you take away the Jimmy Howard games last year, where I don't remember what the record was, but it was absurd. It was like he won 3 of 27 starts or something like that, and you replace him with Thomas Greiss. Like, that's a big upgrade. So I get that the Red Wings are bad, but they're like being valued at historically bad, which was what they were last year, and I don't think that they are this year.
I totally agree, Rob. I bet over 41.5 as soon as it was posted. I hung 47. Dom, I read your preview and you were even higher than that.
Yeah.
It's an addition by subtraction team. They took a lot of like useless pieces and they put guys like Bobby Ryan and Nemestikov and like serviceable NHL players that are going to play, somewhat reasonable minutes. Granted, they're probably playing minutes that are above their quality, but they're far better players than played last year. And given they're going to get to play Chicago 8 times and some of these other middling teams that at least one, if not 2 of them are going to go sour, I just don't think it's going to take that much for Detroit to get to the high 40s or 50 points.
Yeah, I'm at 51.5. Chicago, I mean, that was before they really, I mean, I've got Chicago at 52, but it in a couple of weeks we could easily be looking back and thinking, Detroit's way better than Chicago. Like, I honestly wouldn't be surprised because the Blackhawks are they're treading into dangerous waters here. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I missed from that division. I think like you guys said, it's a log jam there. It's going to be like musical chairs with those 4 teams specifically all season long. And yeah, like a guy like Saros at 50 to 1 to win the Vezina. If the Predators somehow do knock off the Hurricanes and the Lightning and win that top spot, you have to think he's the reason that they do it, or one of the big reasons that they do it, right? So. Yeah, I guess we'll move on and we will talk about what everybody, I think, can agree is, the toughest division by far as the overall quality of the teams, and that's the East Division. I still think Boston's the best team. I know I'm a biased Bruins fan, but I know you guys are on board with that too, I think. I don't think Pittsburgh is that far behind. I've got the Bruins projected at 70 points. Maybe a tiny bit more now that Corey Crawford is out of New Jersey. I think he's worth about 3.5 points in the standings, maybe 3 points in the standings, something like that. That was my estimate. I think the Bruins, and then it's the Penguins, and then the Flyers not far behind at 65. Like one thing that intrigues me about Pittsburgh is I don't think they were a team that should have had to qualify for the playoffs all over again last year, especially given what they had to put up with like in the injury department and everything. And then, they kind of I guess made their own bed when they started Matt Murray in the first game. That was a weird decision, but I don't know. It's a team that I think still has some juice left and still has some jam left. I think they're the one that could challenge the Bruins for top spot. I think probably at 4-1 there would be my bet if I was going to pick a division winner. If that price is still around, I'm not sure. But after that, I'm not sold on the Flyers being an elite team. The Capitals, I believe, are taking a step back this year, probably, but there's obviously the chance that those top stars can carry them once again. And then it's the Islanders and Rangers kind of together there, with the Sabres trailing a little bit behind. They're a team that I think is going to look like the best team on the ice sometimes, assuming that Hall and Eichel are getting a fair shake together. Like, there's going to be times where you're looking at Buffalo, and if you're just a casual fan and you turn on the highlights, and if they start hot like they have in years past, you might be looking at them and thinking like, wow, this is a juggernaut, right? But I would be very careful of that. But they're an intriguing team. I don't think Ullmark has been around long enough for any of us to say that he's like bad. But I don't think he's good either at this point. But the book's still out on him. I think New Jersey, that's a tough spot for them. I don't think they have a top line. I think Nico Hischier is a nice player. Palmieri's a good player. Mackenzie Blackwood seems like a good young goaltender. Crawford was going to be a big help to them this year. I think he was going to be a guy that arguably was going to be a very profitable goaltender, in my opinion. I think he's somebody that was undervalued. Like, people think he was bad on the Blackhawks, probably because of goals against or something stupid like that. But I think this is going to be a tough division. There's probably going to be a team that steps back and one that steps up. But Dom, anything to say here?
Yeah, I had on March 12th, I had Pittsburgh's chances of making the playoffs at 99%. So the fact they had to play a qualifying round series was complete trash. I still can't believe that was a thing that happened. And what happened in those 4 games after, I think, is still fresh in a lot of people's minds, and they think Pittsburgh is washed. And we see that in their point totals, their playoff odds, their division odds, and I don't agree with any of them. I still think this is the clear-cut second best. Well, not clear-cut. I think Philly's right there, but they're the second best team behind Boston, and I think their playoff odds were like -170 or something ridiculously low like that. And
we played -160. That's another one that we collaborated on, actually. I think they're around -200 now. I think I'm around -300. I'm not sure what you're at, but
that's still probably too low. And even the point total, I think, is still too low. I have 68 points for them, so I think I saw around 64 when it first opened, something around those lines. And even division odds, I think they have the second best shot to Boston, and that's a tight division. Boston is without Pasternak for a bit. Their defense is literally McAvoy, Grzelcyk, and players, guys, 4 dudes. It's a strange strategy, but the Bruins are a little vulnerable in that card. So I do really like Pittsburgh. I don't love Washington. I don't think their stars are there anymore, and I don't know if I believe in Laviolette a lot. I can see them taking a similar tumble to what happened to San Jose last year, but at the current prices, I think it's fair. I'd be more inclined to fade the Islanders, though, from where they are, because I think books have them more likely to make the playoffs than not, and I think they're probably the 6th best team in the division now that the Rangers have realized Jack Johnson should not be in their top 6.
I'm sure their fan base won't take offense to that, Dom.
We'll see.
Rob, do you have any thoughts on the East Division, or have you made any bets? Anything you like? I know you've made a ton of bets. You're like us. You had you saw a lot of value in the make-miss playoff markets. So
I think I actually ended up betting 25 of the make-miss 31 teams. So I did see a lot of value there. I do think Boston is the best team in the division. I do agree with Dom, though, that Pittsburgh, like to me, Pittsburgh's point total is still low. looking at 64.5 pretty much at most shops right now, and I have them projected for 67.5. So I like the over there. I especially like their top two lines. They have three good defensemen, Letang, Marino, Dumoulin. Goaltending, I mean, it's a question mark for them just in general, but it's a question mark for a lot of teams in the league where there's just a high degree of variance that you might get out of the goaltenders. I think that's kind of why I still give Boston the advantage in the division overall. I don't like their D-core, but I do like that they can throw Rask or Halak out there on any night. And just there's not many teams in the league that have that type of privilege. For me, the mid-tier are teams that I don't really like. So I completely agree with Dom's sentiment on Washington, where I think that this has kind of just been happening for years now, where they're on a downward trajectory. I don't like the Islanders. They might overachieve because they're really well coached in general, and we've kind of seen that with that team. The Rangers, to me, have too many gaps overall. I think a really good outside long shot bet is Ralph Kruger, Jack Adams, 40-1, because I don't think it's insane for Buffalo to make the playoffs here. And I don't think Ralph Kruger is a good coach. I actually kind of think he's a bit of a goof just in general. But it's one of those things where these teams that are in the division are perceived as being good teams. Washington, the Rangers, the Islanders went deep last year. And if Buffalo can somehow squeak in, I think he almost certainly gets the Jack Adams. And crazier things have happened. I agree with Andy's sentiment on Allmark and Hutton. You don't know what you're going to get, but who knows? Allmark might be better than we think he is overall. So I don't think it's crazy. But, I mean, there's not a lot of I guess this is very similar to what I said about the Central. There's just not a lot of teams in this division that I really love in general. But Pittsburgh would be the one that I'm highest on relative to market.
I couldn't contain my laughter there because you had told me earlier that you also bet Ralph Kruger to be the first coach fired this season. So
now you're going to out me here because I don't. So for this happened on Twitter recently. I won't say who, but bet two sides in the same game.
Yeah.
And the difference is I think I bet Ralph Kruger first fired at 28-1 and him to win Jack Adams at 40-1. So I think there is enough variance with the Sabres. Where both of those are positive expected value.
For sure. Jeff, you've got some ties to Buffalo. Any thoughts on the Sabres?
Yeah, wife and family are from Buffalo, and I've probably watched more Sabres games in the last few years than I'd like to admit. But, I've kind of fallen in love with their overall ineptitude. And, it's they signed Jeff Skinner to a huge deal after a career year, and now he's skating with fourth liners making, $1 bajillion. It's a bad situation. But they're actually doing a lot of good things, and I think this team has a chance to be wildly entertaining to watch this year. The third season seems to be the year that these first-round picks, in their early 20s can really take off. Maybe Rasmus Dahlin takes a big step forward. Again, I'm not a big Allmark guy like you guys, but he's a young kid. Maybe he takes a step forward. There's the one thing that's kind of consistent to me with these middle teams in the division is the variance could be – there's so many positives and so many negatives to all of these teams in the middle. Like a team like the Rangers, their top-end talent is unbelievably good, and their bottom six is unbelievably terrible. Shesterkin might be incredible, and maybe he's not. And it's just the goaltending position as a whole. I'm actually really looking forward to watching a lot of these games this year. And getting back to what you guys were talking about with the pricing in this division, a lot of these teams I feel like are getting priced based on name value. And I was able to bet Pittsburgh plus 550 to win the division and Boston plus 375 to win the division, which are both wildly overpriced compared to what they should be. The only question mark, I think Pittsburgh's excellent. I also have the over 64.5 there. Their top two D pairs and their top two lines are great. I am a bit skeptical of Jari. He's never really been good before, and then he was incredible last year. You look back at some of his AHL numbers and some of his youth numbers, and just not very good. And then he was great last year. It's eerily similar to Binnington, and then Binnington wasn't nearly as good last year as he was 2 years ago. So, yeah, there's a little skepticism there. But as a whole, this division to me it could go so many different directions. Outside of it would be a shocker to me if Boston and Pittsburgh didn't make the playoffs.
For sure. It's it's funny you mentioned Jerry. I actually did take a flyer on him at 33-1 to win the Vezina. He was the longest shot and the smallest bet that I made. And it was more of just a thing where I think the Penguins are, obviously pretty much a lock to make the playoffs, and their defense is better than people think. I think they've got a better I think it's a better situation for a goaltender than the odds suggest it. But I do think that the Bruins, like you said, Dom, the projection is fragile, because if Charlie McAvoy was to go down, that would be a pretty big blow to that team, and would probably knock them down right on par with Pittsburgh if they're not there already. The Islanders, the Rangers, Buffalo, New Jersey, the only team that actually has a bona fide NHL starter outside of Varlamov are the Boston Bruins, really. Carter Hart, of course, and Shesterkin, these guys look like they can carry the load for a full season now. But these are all still unproven goaltenders. Everybody outside of Rask, Halak, Varlamov, they've all got less than 100 games of NHL experience. We're looking at Blackwood, Jarry, Shesterkin, Sorokin doesn't have any. There's a lot of young goaltenders with a ton of potential. I think that's one of the most interesting storylines in this division, is just who's going to. There's a lot of cream here, but which of it is going to rise to the top? They can't all have great seasons, right? So it's a tough place to be for a young goaltender, but there's going to be some good performances this year, so it'll be interesting. Does anybody have any other bets they want to share, or anything they want to talk about from the East Division before we move on and talk about the Canadian Division, the North? No, we're good. All right, yeah, it's the Canadian League. We've got 7 Canadian teams. I think everybody can agree that Ottawa is the worst by far. Got the Senators projected at 51 points. The next team is Vancouver at 61.5, so a pretty big gap there. But yeah, Toronto, I believe, is the best team in the division. That shouldn't shock anybody. I think they've got the most high-end skill. I think Frederik Andersen is a good goaltender who had a bad year. I think their defense is a lot better than people actually think it is. I think if some things go right, that this is the year that Toronto finally becomes the team that everybody thinks they should be. I think we've seen enough good things in the last couple of years from this team and this group of players to be confident that they're moving in that direction. Montreal, everything they did in the offseason is just it's just a deep team. They don't have any real high-end pieces like the Leafs do, I guess, but it's a really deep team, and they're going to be very tough to play against. And they're structured. Their structure, the way they play, is very good. It's very optimal, I guess you would say. And then Calgary, Edmonton. One thing that I've always been kind of confused about, and this has been the last couple of years, it's just the Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl factor, I guess. But everybody always seems to think that the Oilers are better than the Flames. I wouldn't say that. I don't think they have been these last couple of years. I think it's been pretty close, but I would almost always give the edge to Calgary over these last couple of years, and particularly so heading into this season. I think they're the better team by a little bit, couple of points. But yeah, I think Edmonton, Winnipeg, and Vancouver are all pretty close together. Dom, how do you see this shaking out? I know you have the Leafs maybe a little bit higher than I do, which is to be expected.
Yeah, model is obviously a little biased towards the Leafs. I make sure to add an extra point just to mess with people in the comments section, just so they know that I'm a Leafs fan and the model is a Leafs fan too. That's just how it is. It's when you build a model, the model is the same fandom as you. I mean, Andy's got a biased Bruins model. Everyone knows that. I got a biased Leafs model. And Rob probably has a biased Leafs model too, a little. No, maybe. I'm not sure. Yeah, I think the Leafs are the best team in this division. It's not close. And then, honestly, whatever order the next 5 are in, I have no idea. It could be any of them. It could be if Winnipeg finishes second and Montreal finishes sixth, wouldn't surprise me at all. Vancouver second, sure. Calgary second, why not? Edmonton second, sure. Honestly, they could probably finish first because the Leafs aren't a perfect team either. They just happen to be the best of this very interesting division. I don't have the same tiers as you. I have Montreal, Edmonton, and Calgary in one tier, and then Vancouver and Winnipeg in another. I'm a little higher on the Oilers, and I updated this morning as well because it looks like Jujhar Khaira, the player who my model hates the most, is on the taxi squad. So that helped a little bit to bring Edmonton above Calgary. So I guess I'm a little higher on Edmonton this year than most people, and I did see some of the lines, and I think there is some value there. I have had a bit on Leafs to win the Cup because, again, we got the biased model. And then I think Senators, even though I think they're the worst team, I had a higher total than what their posted point total was. I don't remember what it was exactly, but I remember it was a little low.
Yeah, I think the Leafs were, I mean, you could get them anywhere from 17-1 to 20-1, I think, a couple of weeks ago. I'm not sure what they're at now. I don't think that's a bad bet by any means. Rob, where are you at on the North Division? I'm guessing, I know we're all kind of worried that things are going to get a little stale with the teams playing each other so many times, but I mean, it's hard not to be excited about this division with all the Canadian teams going at it. I think it's a fun one-off for sure. I think everybody can agree with that.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I do think I will miss like Leafs Bruins matchups and Leafs Sabres matchups.
Will you though? Will you though?
Well, regular season hasn't been too bad. Let's hope we don't meet in the playoffs. But I agree. I think the Leafs are the best team in the division. There's the least question marks around them in general. I think you could potentially point to their goaltending as a question mark. Maybe their bottom 6 depth is they're relying on some aging veterans there with Thornton and Simmons as well. But overall, it's their division to lose. I do think that there's a big cluster there, and I agree with everyone. I guess for me, I think Calgary's on the top end of that cluster, and I think Vancouver's on the bottom. Is personally where I'd rank them. I think Vancouver under 63.5 points is my favorite under in the NHL this season overall. I think they go in with a very shaky tandem of Demko and Holtby. And I'm probably not as low on Holtby as I think everyone seems to be. But I don't think he's good either. He's not the Holtby of the past in general. I think they have question marks for sure in their bottom 6 forwards and on the back end as well. But so that's kind of where I rank them. But with that said, I think I have them a gap of 4 points between those teams in my predictions. So like to Dom's point, if Vancouver ended up second and Calgary ended up in 6th, that's not going to surprise me at all because I do think that there's such a limited gap between these two teams. The one thing I will say in terms of value, the Art Ross Trophy this year, Connor McDavid is plus 275. That is an implied probability of just under 27%, which I think is insanely low. Like I think Connor McDavid is closer to 40 to 50% to win the Art Ross this year. And people tend to look for value in like long shots. And we've talked about a lot of long shots on season long props in general. But in this division, with the amount of defense that the teams in this division play, McDavid is going to go off. Now, it just so happens that Draisaitl and Matthews are also in the same division, but I still think 275 is some great value there.
Jeff, you are the only American here, so we don't really care what you think about these Canadian teams. No, I'm just joking. I know you are actually probably of all of us, I think, you are the highest on the Leafs, judging by the point totals that went up at that little shop that you work at.
Yeah, and I'm probably the highest on Montreal as well. I kind of have this division in 4 tiers. Toronto, clearly number 1. Montreal, clearly number 2. Edmonton, Calgary, Winnipeg, Vancouver. Not much separating them. I have them in the order I read. The one team that seem to be on an island is Ottawa. I just think they are going to be so bad. The first numbers I ran, I only got to 45 with the points, and I had to do a little tinkering, and I got to 46.5. Was shocked when I saw 52.5 as the next number posted. I mean, this team's going to have a road cone on the right side of the blue line for 60 minutes a night. They are going to give up so many goals. They're going to need Stanley Cup winning Matt Murray to really stay in these games. I look through their forward group, and yeah, they have some nice pieces on offense, but I just don't see this team. I just think they're going to get run over every night. They're just going to give up 4 and 5 goals every night. Yeah, maybe it's a bit of a hyperbole, but I try and I tinker with things, and like right now, I don't think I would make them all that much of a favorite over the Red Wings. Like looking at my rankings, they're pretty close. We've taken a slew of over money, and a lot of it is just ARB money that betting under 51.5 and over 46.5 or over 47.5. But I don't know where the points are going to come from with this team, and how they're going to win 25 games. I just don't know. Under 52.5 on Ottawa is my favorite play in this division.
Cool. I talked to Rob earlier before we got going, and we were talking about this market that was posted at a faraway place earlier in the week. I guess was the first coach to get fired, like we've been talking about, and as we were talking, he pretty much talked me into Travis Green at 20-1. I think he should be a favorite now that I really think about it. I mean, you're looking at the favorite board at this particular shop, and they've got guys like Paul Maurice with Winnipeg, who I don't think you're getting fired with Connor Hellebuck as your goaltender. I don't think that's very likely. I think they're going to, they're not going to be that down and out. I think Green specifically it's not that he's a bad coach. It's not that Vancouver is a really bad team or anything. I just think, like Rob said, he's coming to the end of his deal. The general manager doesn't seem to be the sharpest knife in the drawer, and he's kind of handcuffed him. He's sending him into a season with a downgrade in goal. He's taken some of his depth away, and I think there's a world where the Canucks get off to a bad start. Maybe it's such a bad start that they're like in Senators territory. You never know, and there's going to have to be a change, and he would likely be the first guy to suffer any kind of change, right? So I think it's a good bet. I like it. You talked me into it, Rob. You didn't really have to try that hard. I think I don't know if you have anything to add on that one.
I mean, he's a lame duck coach, right? 1 year left on his contract. Like a guy like Maurice, for example, he signed for 3 more years at $3 million. Like Winnipeg's not going to cut ties with him unless they really feel like they need to. So I'm kind of looking for those types of coaches that are on probably their last year of their deal, not locked in long term, and on teams that I project to be under their season win totals, where I think they're going to underperform. And I think Vancouver fits the bill, like more so than any other team in the league.
For sure, yeah. I think last year, by February, before the trade deadline, I think we had 8 coaches canned in the NHL. I'm not sure how things will go this season. With there's going to be a little bit of difficulty in terms of hiring someone new and getting them to into your organization with quarantine and all that stuff. So decisions will have to be made, with a little bit more thought, I guess, in that regard. But I know we have pretty much covered everything. Is there anything else that anybody else wants to get to before we sign off and get some sleep before a busy day tomorrow when everything starts?
I just want to say that I actually do have Ottawa worse than Detroit at this point. They're for some reason scratching Colin White in favor of Artem Anisimov, which is peak Ottawa, just doing things that don't make sense. So I still have them over 46, but definitely under 51. I'm in the middle of that range.
All right, so yeah, bet against human achievement there for the Senators, I guess, if you can find a number that Dom likes. Well, thanks, guys. I appreciate you all joining me tonight. Hopefully, we can do this again sometime. Maybe not to this scale, but really appreciate everybody's insight, and give everybody a follow on Twitter. If you're following me at Digital Gambler, you can surely find these guys on Twitter as well. Thanks, and